Okay then, a very good afternoon everyone. And on behalf of all the team here at Complete IT, I'd like to thank you for joining us for the latest in our weekly webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about what, statistically speaking, is the cybersecurity threat that's most likely to get you in trouble, and that's phishing. I'm Dan Scott from Complete IT, and for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to explore what phishing is, what happens if you fall victim to an attack, and how you can avoid both yourself and your businesses being impacted by phishing. So please do send in questions as we go along, and I'm looking forward to going through them at the end. So first and foremost, what is phishing? Well, we all remember the emails that you received from a bank that you've never banked with, in a country you've never lived in. They were all pretty easy to discount. Well, those attacks over time have evolved. There's a saying in cybersecurity that the internet gave us access to everything, but it also gave everything access to us. We all share online, and it doesn't take too long to connect the dots and be able to communicate with us in a language and context that we will respond to. The result is a very targeted message that, although not perfect, is more than often enough to get us to click. Invoices, password resets, polite reminders, payment requests, they use them all. Once clicked, the goal is really simple: to take control of a PC or to get you to hand over your login credentials to an online service. And at this point, we will have our first virtual hands up for any of us who use the same username and password across multiple sites and services. We'll come on to why that's so dangerous later on. So to infect people's computers or gain access to their login credentials, you can either spend lots of time and money, quote unquote, hacking people's computers. And now I'm not sure why all hackers wear hoodies and work in the dark either, but hey ho. Now that sounds like an awful lot of effort for one person's password. And if you go after a really big company, it's most likely going to end you up in jail sooner or later, which, just ask Daniel Kelly, who last year received a 4-year sentence for hacking TalkTalk. Alternatively, you can construct some targeted phishing campaigns against multiple targets in a single go, in the hope that you can get them to engage with you. Now, to any marketeers in the audience, that may sound eerily familiar, as it's not a million miles away from how we all market to our existing and future clients or customers: the art of the click. It's cheaper and easier to get people to tell you their secrets than it is to employ someone to sit in a dark room, wearing a hoodie, listening to dubstep music playing in the background, and typing code into green matrix-style screens, as they always seem to. Now, being the awful work colleague that I am, I occasionally like to send phishing campaigns round to my unsuspecting colleagues in an attempt to see what happens. Here is one such campaign. Firstly, you've got to make it look believable. As we said before, receiving an email from a bank that you've never banked with in a country that you've never lived in is pretty easy to hit the delete button on. This Amazon voucher was, quote unquote, sent by Rebecca, our HR manager, from whom our team may from time to time receive reward and recognition gifts from. Incidentally, nobody noticed in the body of the email, that I forgot to change amazon.co.uk to amazon.co.uk from amazon.com. But when you make something that looks believable and is something that people feel they have to or want to click on, they don't see the detail, they only see the periphery. Fast forward a couple of days, and you have this little lot. So in my campaign, I sent out 49 emails to a section of our team. Those emails were opened 117 times. 16 people clicked through to the login page, and 2 people put their Amazon credentials in on my fake login page. So that would be 2 people if I were actually collecting those credentials that I harvested from one email that I sent out. It's not bad work. Now, if those people had used their work email address and password to sign up for their Amazon accounts, I can now log into their work email account. So let's have a look at some more examples. You see this email. Nobody wants to be that person that forgets to pay an invoice, and as a result, everybody's email gets cut off. The font looks okay. The feel of the email is okay, doesn't immediately stand out. The language it uses seems acceptable. However, on closer inspection, you hover over the link, and well, let's say it's certainly not Microsoft. I think it's safe to say that whatever is in that link is something that you most certainly do not want to download, and something that you really do not want running on your PC. Here's an example from last year that was sent to our marketing director, Jess, from what appears to be our managing director, Colin. A few quick emails on this thread and responses, and you'd end up severely out of pocket, I would wager, or potentially even a lot worse. Now, when we look at emails like this in the context of a cybersecurity webinar, it's really obvious that they're wrong. And it's really obvious that that isn't Colin's email address. However, on a busy day, when you're just trying to keep on top of your inbox, as well as all the other projects that you're working and managing, it's really easy to either respond or to click, depending on the want of the email. So you've clicked. Unlike my unsuspecting 2 Amazon victims, colleagues, you put your username and password into the fake website. So now what? This is most likely where you will end up. On the so-called dark web, being traded before eventually just being dumped on an identity theft forum for anybody with the spare time and inclination to have some fun at your expense. As an FYI, the going rate for the proven identity or the known identity of somebody in a developed Western European nation at the moment, it's around about £150 on the open market on the dark web. That is a strict market of supply and demand. So as a larger supply would flood the market, such as the uptakes from the recent EasyJet breach, which you may have seen, previously the British Airways Amex breach, then the value of individuals decreases because there are more of them on offer. So somebody can obtain you even cheaper. Remember, if you use the same credentials on multiple sites, if you get caught once, then you've been caught everywhere. So let's have a look at how to spot a phishing attack, because as we've seen, they are not always that obvious. So firstly, the email. Now, phishing doesn't only come in via email. It could also be undertaken by the telephone, such as people calling up to say that they're calling from Microsoft and they've noticed that there's a problem with your computer. As lovely as it would be for Microsoft to look after every single one of their indirect customers, unfortunately, it is not practical for them to do so. And so these are, I would say, always imposters. Second of all, could be by a text message is another common route of people sending texts in order to, again, elicit password challenges and responses. But email is by far the most prevalent. Emails often have commonalities, 4 of which I'll highlight with you. First of all, point number 1 in the list on the right-hand side there, that sense of urgency, a call to action, something I had better do this or I'm going to get in trouble. It responds to something deep within our subconscious of I really don't want to be in trouble, a little bit of fight or flight maybe, of I have to get myself out of this quickly, maybe I've missed something before. Moving on to point number 5, links to another domain. We've just seen an example of this with our fake Microsoft email a couple of minutes ago. By teaching people to roll over those links, check they're going where they say they're going to go, and if in doubt, don't click. Moving on to point 6, scare tactics. Again, reinforcing that urgency, hoping that someone's going to catch us and make us do something that otherwise we wouldn't, by really putting a threat behind something. And then lastly, point 9, an email for phishing will not always have an attachment, not always the way. As we saw in the email that Jess received, pretending to be from Colin around buying of gift vouchers, it most certainly didn't. It was hoping that there would be a response with voucher codes that could then be anonymously claimed. However, some will. So it's very important that if you don't recognize an attachment, that you don't go anywhere near it. Quite commonly, there will either be zip files, so containers that contain other files, or they could be macro-enabled Office documents, which is another route that many of the viruses will take or the hackers will take in their campaigns. There's a really good reason why our complete endpoint security service was set up to block Office macro-enabled Office documents. Yes, they can be used legitimately. However, it is a very common usage of cyber criminals in order to get code that will run on your machine, which is why out of the box we block them. Next up is the web page, where you're going to go through to if you were to click a link. Again, it usually looks good, but it'll be a bit off. The address may almost be there, but often substituting letters for numbers or having slight misspellings. So type squatting is the buzzword for this one. So coming up with app1 instead of the le.com, etc. Now, there are ways and means of security software defending against going to some of these addresses. They are usually registered very close to the point of which the attacker will send the campaign. So they'll buy their domain name, they'll craft their campaign and send it. So one of the things that web protection software may look for is how old is this domain? Does it have a reputation? Has it been around a while? And if not, I might block it depending on the rules that have been set up. However, not always. There'll rarely be a navigation footer or header navigation bar, because why on earth would the cyber criminal want you to click off and go and have a look in the Apple store whilst you're there, rather than giving them their money? Because the only place that can go to is the legitimate website, or you would immediately know. You may, of course, get lucky, and there could be some formatting errors or typos. However, there often won't be. And the more that time goes on, the more and more sophisticated these attacks are becoming. So it's not something, I'm afraid, that we can guarantee on anymore. So most importantly, then, we've learned about what happens when you get hit, and also some of the ways in which criminals look to exploit using these techniques. So how can we protect our organizations against phishing attacks? Well, to protect against phishing, you utilize the same 3 pillars that we use for any cybersecurity strategy, and they are always people, process, and technology, and I would argue in that order. It's a universal approach for how to deal with most cybersecurity threats faced by organizations today, and I'm going to give you examples of what you can do around all 3 areas. So first and foremost, people. In my opinion, to defend against phishing attacks, you have to educate your teams in what phishing is, how it can harm your business, what to look for to see if an email is real, how they can practice better overall cybersecurity hygiene. An example of this could be using a password manager, so they avoid reusing usernames and passwords across all of the services that they use. In case people are under the impression that perhaps adding a special character at the end of a password or changing a letter to be a capital may be enough to throw people off the scent, it's very easy to craft a script that would say, I know that this is a username and password for somebody because we've captured that from our honeypot, our fake Amazon that we set up and we sent an email for. And the odds are that they might use slight tweaks and variances across other services. So when you're writing that script, it's going to try and log in as somebody on all these sites and services. You just do it 2 or 3 times, and you might put a capital letter at the beginning, exclamation mark at the end, or a dollar symbol at the end, etc. Because most people will form the same pattern. So please don't think that that sort of slight tweak is really going to do you an awful lot of favors when it comes to not being breached. I heard a phrase recently regarding this people strategy and awareness training, and that's patch the human. We now all, I hope, undertake regular updates of all of our IT systems to ensure that they are updated and free of threats from vulnerabilities that manufacturers have found within their products and software. That's why we patch. However, we often don't do the same with our people. So a nice catchy one to remember that helped me was patch the human. People, process, and technology. Without all 3 working together, you won't have that effective cybersecurity defense. Too often, regrettably, we find organizations that believe they have bought X product, and so now they believe everything is fine and they're protected. I'd love this to be the case, but as always happens with technology, the best made plans can come undone when the people using them do things that the system never knew that they would ever do. Paradoxically, people may not do what the system expects of them. No system is ever 100% effective as a cybersecurity defense strategy. I wish it were. Unfortunately, it just isn't the case. By teaching security awareness training and process, you can both educate your teams to know what to look for, but also what to do when they think they found something, which leads us on to process. Cyber Essentials is a brilliant scheme, and whilst you could argue that any government doesn't have that many home runs when it comes to policy and initiative, Cyber Essentials is one that has definitely succeeded. A government-backed, officially recognized, affordable certificate for your organization that not only proves to those you do business with that you're ahead of the pack when it comes to cybersecurity, but also undertaking the certification will teach your organization the processes that you need in order to stay secure. Give your organization a competitive edge by demonstrating your cybersecurity commitment through having a Cyber Essentials certificate, and also teach your team members those processes that they need to be able to follow as part of our people, process, and technology plan in order to stay safe. Moving on to technology, and this is hot off the press. For just over 2 years now, we have been searching for a technology solution that can better protect our clients from modern phishing threats, and it's great to be able to share this with you today. Using our as yet unnamed phishing protection service. So if you have any good suggestions for names, please pop them in the questions box on the webinar, and also please keep sending your questions in. Looking forward to going through them at the end. Using our unnamed phishing protection service for Office 365, you can stop a great deal of phishing emails from ever hitting your team's inboxes. I'd love to say 100%, but as we've already said, nothing is 100%. Unlike a traditional spam filter that just isn't equipped to deal with social engineering attacks, service impersonations, and fake payment requests, our anti-phishing service uses machine learning to analyze your inbox, who emails you, where from, in order to make live decisions on which emails are in fact not real as they arrive into your inbox. Unlike a spam filter, it's not just about keywords, it's about the language that's being used, its structure, and its content, and all working together to be able to spot these modern threats. Here you can see our dashboard for Complete IT. 299 attacks have been stopped, and 2 recent attacks, pretending to be something they really aren't, are listed down at the bottom there. Note the same subject in the email going to 2 different people, one case being our Bristol support address and the other my colleague Elliot. However, they've come from 2 different addresses. We've got one of Ashley Kung at brightcoms.com and one from Claire Lune at something I can't pronounce. So it's really interesting that the same email has come out of 2 different domain names, most likely breached accounts that the hacker has control of, or of course just randomly generated ones. But you can see the number of people that receive things. So when you think you've received a fake invoice come through and you've hit the archive button and it was only you because you're the only person in the 2 box, what's incredible and we've seen since using this solution is just how many people receive the same thing within, say, a 15-20 minute span of each other. The service plugs straight into Office 365. Your email never leaves Microsoft's cloud. Phishing emails can be either deleted as they are detected, or just moved to the user's junk folder. Users receive an email to alert them that the service has just intercepted an attack. If it's a false positive, they can just go into their junk folder and move it back to their inbox. So it's simple, effective, and with no disruption to your email when we deploy the solution. Here's a great example of a real attack against Complete IT. So Raymond and Sahel are colleagues. They work together based at one of our clients' offices. Our anti-phishing service intercepted this attack being sent to Raymond from somebody pretending to be Sahel. The service tells us clearly that you do normally receive emails from Sahel, but you don't receive them from this email address. There's a suspicious call to action in the language. So coming back to our earlier look at what crafts an email for a phishing attempt, it's always about that call to action, or it's always about the language that's used, but maybe a few things that if you don't do this, something's going to happen. So in this case, there is a suspicious call to action in the language of the email, and also the URL link that's linked to further below is suspicious. The email is claiming to be from a Microsoft service from OneDrive. However, the domain listed behind the link is not a Microsoft domain, and the service knows that because it knows all of the domains that Microsoft use. Equally, we've seen other attacks coming in commonly from LinkedIn. The amazing thing here, the reason I highlight it to you, is that Raymond and Sahel may well send emails like this to each other. The attacker here has learnt about that Raymond and Sahel, that they work together, they exchange emails about IT administration. They have then crafted an attack to exploit this relationship. It's true social engineering. And I'm just glad we're seeing this on a dashboard of threats that have been stopped, rather than after a ransomware attack that's come as a result of somebody perhaps clicking a link in this email. A traditional spam filter just isn't equipped to handle attacks like this and apply that machine learning analysis to the content, to the links. It's something that they were just never built for. So we're really happy now that we have a defense technology to help your organizations protect against the threats of phishing. To find out more, and if you choose to have a scan undertaken of your Office 365 environment to see what threats are already in your inboxes, then please just get in touch with a member of your Complete IT team. Lastly, on technology, I'm going to talk about multi-factor authentication. So to cut through the jargon, multi-factor authentication is requiring something other than your password to log into a service. Commonly, this can happen via a code that is generated by a smartphone app. It can also happen, although less ideally, via a text message, SMS text message that comes through to you, or even via an email that's sent to you, which is probably for me the last link in the chain, with app being the top, then moving down through SMS and email. I would suggest that any internet-facing service that you have, so that could be your emails, it could be your social networks, it could be online shopping, whatever that is, any internet-facing service that you have should be protected by a multi-factor authentication system. Crucially, by the way, I've missed out on that list and should very much have said anything such as a remote desktop server or where you log in to then access your company applications. Very, very critical, especially if you don't have to connect to a VPN connection before you open that remote session. Now, what's the reason behind multi-factor authentication? Why is it so important? Why does it defend us? If our password were to leak out into the outside world, as we saw before, and ended up starting to be traded on an identity theft forum, and people trying to log in as you into different services to place orders, forward your emails, whatever it is that they choose to do, just anything that's nefarious. Somebody does know that password and you have that account secured with multi-factor authentication, especially via, say, that phone app, they still can't log in as you, because in order to log in as you, they need to provide that secondary point of contact that tells the service, yes, this is me that's trying to log in. And I know it's me because I'm getting it from an app on my phone that needs my fingerprint, which means it has to be with me, and the circle completes. So that's why with multi-factor authentication, it's so important. Prove you are who you say you are. So if our credentials have been breached, we have a second line of defense. Ultimately, where are we heading as an industry? Where is the technology industry going? We will move towards something that would be considered passwordless. There are a couple of alternatives out there at the moment already for people attempting these technologies, and Microsoft have a feature within the Microsoft 365 cloud currently for utilizing a passwordless sign-in via their smartphone authenticator application. I think a passwordless world would be wonderful. They are the weakest link in the chain in every way, shape, and form when it comes to cybersecurity. The quicker we move away from them, the better. But however, for now, they are very much here to stay, and we have to manage them as best we can. So multi-factor authentication, I know it's inconvenient, and not being able just to put your password in and log straight in is inconvenient. However, the security benefits that that inconvenience brings, I believe, is more than worth the inconvenience. And second of all, just while we're talking about passwords, appreciate it's not on the slide, but again, mentioned earlier on about password managers, again, something that I would really, really urge people to go and look into using on a personal basis and bringing into the work environment too. Just like multi-factor authentication, yes, they can be troublesome, or there is extra effort involved rather than just having the same password, albeit with some exclamation marks and capital letters thrown in for good luck. However, when you can reach a place such as where I am, where I sort of quite simply don't know my username and password to log on to the services that I use, I don't know my Amazon password, I don't know my Google password, I don't know my Microsoft password. The reason I don't is because they're stored in my password manager. It generates them for me. And when I go to those web pages via a little browser plugin that sits up in the top right-hand corner of your browser, it pushes them into the web pages for me to log in. Then I get my phone for two-factor authentication. So by looking at password managers and moving to a place where, number one, you don't know your passwords, and number two, you know where they've been reused, because the password manager will tell you if one's been reused in more than one location, you'll be in a far more secure place than you are today. So on that note, slightly ahead of schedule, it would now be a great time to have a look at your questions. So I'd like to invite my colleague Jess, who has been keeping an eagle eye on your questions. One of the things about doing these things from home is that I don't quite have as many screens as I'd be used to when I'm in the office, and so it's a bit difficult to keep an eye on both what's going on in PowerPoint and what's going on questions at the same time. So hello, Jess.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you very much for your presentation. We've got a few questions in there at the moment, so keep coming in and we'll try and answer as many as possible. First of all, do you have any collateral to show how your new solution adds value when it is used in addition to Office 365 ATP?
Sorry, could you just repeat the end bit of that again? I had a little break up on Zoom.
Do we have any collateral to show how the new solution adds value when it is used in addition to Office 365?
Probably the best collateral I can suggest is that, as I touched upon, we have the ability to run a scan with no changes being made at all of what's inside of an Office 365 environment, to look at I found emails that, had I been switched on, I would have found. it is worth saying that definitely with the higher levels of Office 365 or Microsoft 365, excuse me, it's going to take me a while to get rid of that. ATP, so Advanced Threat Protection, for anyone not up with Microsoft's acronyms. As you move further up through the Microsoft 365 plans, you gain access to more of their technology. Microsoft's ATP, Advanced Threat Protection, as you go up through those plans, is quantifiably different to the levels of spam and malware protection on email that are available in the lower tiers. So there is less of an advantage as you move into those levels of ATP. However, there can still be benefits to any two solutions, always better than one. So yes, we have a way of running a scan to show what has been found within your tenancy on Office 365 is probably the best thing I could suggest.
Okay, multi-factor authentication. Can you make it so that I don't have to use MFA when I'm at my office home or any other place I often go to? So when it recognises that you are logging in with a device, it knows, I guess that means.
Yeah, you can indeed. You can indeed. So there's a couple of different ways of achieving it, and it's all dependent on the service that you're using and what it makes available. So I'll focus on Microsoft 365 because that's probably the most common that people will be looking to secure. So access to your Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, email, all of our critical business data. So within Microsoft 365, again, as you go up through the higher plans, so into what would have been Microsoft 365 Business beforehand, which the name, excuse me, does now escape me. I think it's Business Premium, Microsoft Business Premium. Then within Microsoft Business Premium, you have what's known as conditional access, which we ourselves use at Complete IT. And to cut the IT jargon, what conditional access means is that we can set locations, and we define those locations by the internet address that you appear to Microsoft 365 from. And we can say that when you're within these locations, you don't need to be putting your 6-digit code in every time. You're behind the firewall. So our guest networks may go, our guest Wi-Fi, for example, may go out of a different address to differentiate those people. So you're behind the firewall, you're in a known secure location, and so I don't need to know that extra factor of authentication of who you are, where you're from. So another, in this current environment, excuse me, of working from home predominantly, as we all start to migrate to the new normal, whilst people are at home, obviously behind a multitude of different addresses presenting from their home broadband, if you were to connect to a VPN to the office, then all of a sudden your traffic then appears from the office. So commonly with us, it's the WatchGuard VPN client that lives on your laptop. Connect to the office, all your traffic is coming out from your work environment and will talk to Microsoft 365 and receive those conditional access policies.
Okay, great. What's your recommendation for a password manager? Would it be LastPass?
I've just changed mine actually, so it's a good one because a couple of weeks ago, I would have said LastPass. I've switched to one. So last couple of weeks, and it was relatively straightforward. They're quite portable between password managers because they all have export features, so you can just export them as a Excel file, XML file, and then you can import them into the other ones. Of course, they all have imports and export. Well, they all have imports for each other's passwords because they want to make it really easy for people to switch them. So I did use LastPass, and I recently switched to a service called MyKey, which is MYKI. And the reasons I switched to MyKey are twofold. Number one, they do not store your data on their servers. So all the devices that you use, and I've got it on 4, all the devices that you use operate a sync between them using MyKey as almost like a relay. So the data never stops with them. So it's really good for me to know that actually my password data only lives on my devices. And second of all, MyKey is a really great feature whereby the multi-factor authentication code, so those 6-digit codes that I use to sign into all the products and services that I use online that support that methodology, MyKey has the ability to synchronize those also around my devices. So I don't have to, for example, if I'm on my personal laptop and I need to log into my Complete IT Microsoft 365 account, I don't have to go and grab my work phone off the side in the kitchen. I can grab the 2-factor authentication code from my MyKey app running on my personal laptop. Now, one question that brought to me was, okay, you've got these multi-factor authentication codes. introduce an element of insecurity. However, what happens with the MyKey app is after a period of inactivity, which you can define, is the app locks down on all the devices, so you have to re-authenticate to it. So, for example, on my personal laptop, I do that via Windows Hello. So it uses the camera to scan, do a face scan like on the iPhone, knows it's me, and unlocks the application. So a couple of good reasons for me. First of all, was not having the data stored anywhere centrally, which was a good step. But second of all, probably more of a draw for me was actually the synchronizing of those two-factor authentication tokens. But when it comes to password manager, whatever you're most comfortable, use LastPass for a long, long time, and a very good application. So I'd try them out. I'd see which one works for you, because as with any piece of software, it's a really personal preference as to how things work and what works best for you. I don't think, definitely between the two that I've used, there's a bad solution. Out there. There are others such as KeyPass, which stores all your data locally. Can be a bit of an issue if you want to get it across multiple devices. But times 1Password, if you're a big Apple user, so if you're using a Mac and using an iPhone, 1Password was the number one, and then Password was the traditional one there. But stick with it would be my tips with a password manager. If you've never used one, at first they can be a challenge. They can be. Stick with it. You learn the workflow, and it becomes second nature quicker than you think. However, at first, when you're used to just typing the same thing in over and over again, it's a bit strange to have to go through a bit of a rigmarole in some cases in order to sign in, because it couldn't be simpler than just typing in your standard password everywhere. However, when you read something like the EasyJet breach that was in the news 2 weeks ago, I have an EasyJet account. I was included in that data breach. However, I've got the security of knowing all I have to do is just go into EasyJet and change my EasyJet password, because it's not the same in any way, shape, or form as any of my other passwords. And I also haven't got a clue what my EasyJet password was or is. So it just takes all the sting out of it. Whereas if you're reading that EasyJet breach and you know that EasyJet password that you've got is a bit similar to your Facebook one and rather similar to your Outlook.com or Gmail, and also probably a little bit similar to your work password, that's a rather worrying place to be, because, as I said, once you're known one place, you're known everywhere.
Thank you. And is the password manager a corporate solution?
Yeah, there are both. So with again with MyKey, it's complete IT. So as you've seen from when we're talking about our anti-phishing solution, we use all our own technology. It might sound obvious, but we do. Worth reiterating. And one of the things that Simon, our head of technology, and I were looking at last week is MyKey have a corporate solution as well, that I think we may embark upon a little run through of in probably in July, I think, at this rate. Now, what that gives you is quite clever, is the ability to share passwords with team members. So I'll give you a working example. You might have a business Facebook account, as we do. So Jess, who I'm on with now, Jess and Jess's team have access, of course, to all of our social media accounts, so they can keep them updated with all the brilliant content that they create. Having those credentials shared is quite a tricky task to undertake, because you have to log in as the same thing. So how do you share them? So with the enterprise portal that they have, it gives you the ability to say, here are all of the team members. This password is a member of the marketing group, and the marketing group has access to the following people. So then it just appears within their MyKey. So somebody new that joins, add them into the group, they get the passwords. Another idea may be on someone's first day at work, when Complete IT have set their accounts up for them, is that we have set their passwords for login, etc., and we've just published them down into that user's password vault, so they log in and they don't need to say, oh, it's password 01 or something equally atrocious, which hopefully it never would be, to log into, say, their CRM system. It's just pre-populated in there. It's 30 characters long, a mixture of upper, lower, special characters, and it just gets filled in. So yeah, it is there. Not something that we're there with yet, but definitely something that we're going to be exploring.
Great. And what is Third Wall?
Third Wall. Third Wall is a collection. When it boils down, it's a collection of scripts that take cybersecurity and cybersecurity policies and enforce them at a local level. So let me just distill that down out of quite so many buzzwords. It is a way of saying, in order to better protect a machine, a computer, we need to do certain things with it. Certain things may be restricting it from running macros inside of Office documents, stopping local logons, renaming the local administrator account. So every computer out of the box comes with what's called a local administrator account. Now, of course, if you're a hacker, you know that there's a local account called administrator. So it does make quite good common sense in order to change that to something that's random. Third wall, on its basic level, as part of our complete endpoint security solution, is deployed alongside our remote management agent, and it deploys those policies out to machines. Now we configure a number of policies within our default setup. We then bespoke it on a client by client basis if appropriate. So we dial it up, and equally we can dial it down. So for example, if somebody has a loss of Office macros that they use, they might need that disabled. Unfortunately, they do have to then take the risk of Office macros that may come in illegitimate files that could come in via a phishing email that they are at risk from. So with Third Wall, we deploy a number of these security policies, some of which you could deploy via what previously would have been known as Windows Group Policy, which is a way of applying settings across a number of machines. However, my laptop, for example, won't have seen any group policy at least within the last 9 weeks, because I haven't been near one of our servers on the same network. So it hasn't had a chance to update those. With Third Wall, policies are updated every 5 minutes. Via our remote monitoring and management server, via our Complete IT Automate service, that is the sort of hub of our complete endpoint security service, so that those policies are enforced and kept up to date. Then when you move into the more, I guess, the higher value elements of that part of the solution, we also have a ransomware detection element as part of that solution. So a number of files are deployed into everybody's computer in hidden locations that you can't see. What happens if you get infected by ransomware? Sooner or later, the ransomware is going to try and encrypt those files that we've put on your machine. It's called a tripwire. And when that tripwire gets triggered, the agent kicks in, removes your machine from the internet, from being able to talk to local machines. It essentially makes it a completely isolated terminal. The only thing it can talk to is our monitoring server. So we have the ability to take remote control. We have the ability to log on, diagnose the problem, see whether it actually is ransomware or something's just hit the tripwire file, for example, which of course does happen. But tripwires, it's not 100% guaranteed way of doing it. Nothing is. However, it's a good indication, another security. So you think about the old cybersecurity onion model of having various layers. It's another really good level of protection at local machines to stop a ransomware infection, because the last thing it does, of course, is tell you that it's there. So by the time you know something's there, it's encrypted everything. It will go for map drives. It will go for anything it can find. So any layer that we try and finding to stop it is great. So that's another element that it provides. And then lastly, USB device protection. We have the ability to say that only within corporate machines, only certain USB storage devices such as memory keys and hard drives are able to be plugged in. So we can whitelist those, and then as they get plugged in, gives the ability to say actually it's not on the whitelist, so we're not going to let you read and write files to there, which is both a data leak prevention step for organizations to make sure that sensitive data isn't being copied outside of the organization, and also to protect against USB drive-by attacks such as memory sticks that may contain auto-run files which could cause viruses. So it's by stopping those from being introduced into the system. So a multitude of things that we deliver as part of our complete endpoint security solution that allow us to apply a cybersecurity policy over machines in a standard level. So we define a policy that the standard for our service, it gets deployed everywhere, gets enforced every 5 minutes, and is a load of, very, in some cases, completely common sense, like disabling or renaming local administrator accounts, and in other ways quite advanced, such as those ransomware trip files and USB storage blocking. So hopefully that helps.
Great. Working from home and with other users also working from home, so family members, how exposed are we through our routers?
I'd say routers, I wouldn't focus on. I'd say we're all extremely exposed because we've lost the help and support of the person sat next to us. So, for example, you receive a silly email, you received a daft email. I've lost the ability to lean over to Jess and say, does this look real to you? That's the bigger thing that we've lost working from home. We are by proxy alone, and alone people are more vulnerable because they haven't got the support of those around them. So I would, from a cybersecurity strategy, if I were performing a risk analysis for any business of anybody on the call today and people are working from home, I would be categorizing that as a high risk. So something that is both has a high likelihood and a high impact, which means that we give it a red critical when we're doing a cybersecurity risk analysis, because the impact of somebody making mistakes such as a phishing email could be extreme to the organization, and they're being sent all the time, so the probability is also high. Yep. As for routers, the biggest thing that you could probably, the biggest risk there would be one that is running an outdated version of software, and also traffic going out to not being filtered. So when we're behind the firewalls in the office, of course, we have things such as, web blockers, web filters that stop us from going to malicious sites that we may not have at home, depending on the solution. So that would introduce an element of risk. But I'd say the risk of technology while we're at home is probably far outflanked by when we come back to the cybersecurity 3-pillar strategy: people, process, and technology. People are by far the biggest of those 3 pillars, and at the moment, people are far more vulnerable than they would be within an office environment. Yes, because we don't have as much technology to protect them, but I would argue, probably on a personal level, I don't think I've got any empirical evidence for it, but I would argue definitely that they are more at risk because of their exposure from being alone.
Do we have, or do you have a service you use to deliver training for phishing to employees, and can it subsequently send them test phishing emails?
We've got 2, so I'll mention 2. I'll start with the training. So we have 2 things that can help you. First of all, we have our Complete Learning Academy, complete training platform, which hopefully everybody who's on the call who is a Complete IT client will have heard about. If not, please, after this, send an email to anybody you know with an @complete-it.co.uk email address and say training platform ? Or something similar, and we will make that happen for you. So as part of our strategy since the COVID-19 lockdown, we have made available to every single one of our clients 25 logins, I believe it was, off the top of my head, to our Learning Academy platform, where you can learn about everything from mental health, well-being, to phishing, to how to use Microsoft products and services like Teams and Outlook in these really sort of small bite-sized chunk videos. Is brilliant. So number one, please take advantage of that. There is some cybersecurity pieces in there as well, such as things like phishing. Second of all, when it comes to training, our brilliant team of technical consultants who are very, very happy, able, capable, and brilliant at spending time with our clients' teams in order to run education workshops such as this. So getting people together and talking about some of the things that we've done today, albeit maybe going off and then doing some exercises as well, to get people involved and see where, oh, I didn't realize that I was vulnerable there. I thought that would have been good. It wasn't, and teaching them what to spot. When it comes to the testing angle, interesting point, work in progress for us. Expect to see something, I hope, probably next few months, whilst we are evaluating ways and means that our clients can take advantage of that. Worth mentioning, somebody has already asked today about Microsoft ATP, Advanced Threat Protection. In one of the higher tiers of Advanced Threat Protection, there is a testing utility that you can take advantage of. So I want to make that out there because someone's mentioned ATP already today. So there is one available within these high tiers of Microsoft 365, not on all of them. So it's worth asking, apologies if it isn't in one that your business is currently using. Obviously, it's up to Microsoft what they put in which plan. However, we are also looking at ways and means that we can bring that as a service to our clients. Being completely transparent as we always are, we have to find a way that we can do this at scale in a way that our clients would expect, and expect us to deliver a service to them. We're currently evaluating some different options for how we can run that service so that we can figure out the best way that we can deliver that at scale. It's very easy when you're just sending it to Complete IT, but if all of a sudden we're managing a series of tests, say for example once a quarter for clients who would like to partake in that service, we have to find a way of executing on that and making sure that nothing gets missed and the right campaigns are being sent out at the right time. So there's a bit of thought around that for us and a couple of different ways we can achieve it, but it's something that we're on with. And yeah, the I can't remember the exact name of the Microsoft one now in ATP, in Advanced Threat Protection, but there is one there in its higher plans. Don't know if it comes with some of the niceties like predefined templates to make it look like, say, Amazon or PayPal or something like that. But the mechanism is there to send an email and then look at the clicks.
And one last question. Have you heard of a protection service, ClearScore Protect, that monitors the dark web? And do you have anything similar?
Yeah, I use ClearScore. I've used it for a little while, actually. I think it's really useful. I thought it was a really interesting thing, because previously I used to pay for my Experian and Equifax report. So anyone that doesn't know, so clearscore.com, I think it is a credit reference check utility, but it's free. And the reason it's free, it uses Experian, I think off the top of my head. And the reason it's free is because they monetize by using your data to position with you products and services for financial service offers. So I think I had one this morning saying you get an email that says, like, check out your latest pre-approved loans and credit cards, all that kind of stuff. But on the flip side of that, you get access to your credit report, credit score searches that happen on your account, all those sorts of things that we all do need to keep a track of, in case all of a sudden somebody started buying mobile phones in your name. The only time you find out is when you go to get a mortgage and whenever you need to renew it, and then they say, oh, you've been declined on credit purposes or whatever, you've just never noticed. So ClearScore, as part of that, have a dark web monitoring service. So when I showed that spreadsheet earlier on of those passwords that got pulled out of an ID theft forum, they keep a database of those, and they allow you to check your email addresses against them. Obviously, they have to put email addresses in individually, which doesn't make it great for a company. The majority of their data, from the top of my head, comes from the Have I Been Pwned database, so PWNED, Have I Been Pwned database, which is pretty universal these days for people to use as a source of checking known breach data. So I would advise people to go and sign up for an account there, have a look through, throw your email address in. But yeah, it definitely can't hurt to use the ClearScore one. I can't see any problems with it. With using it, it's not that comprehensive. But one of the issues with dark web scanning utilities, and there's quite a lot of them these days, is none of them can claim to have 100%. Because number one, they all have to say, we do not buy data. Because if they're paying cyber criminals to get lists of email addresses, then they're just as bad as everyone else, because they're funding the industry. It's always the way, isn't it? If you get hit by ransomware, never ever pay the ransom, because all you're doing is funding the creation of better malware. You are paying people to get better at scamming people, is the only option. So all these ID theft people that offer the ID breach services, they by proxy have to wait until they're available for free, or they can just obtain them somehow. But they can't transact with the bad guys, because if not, they become the bad guys. So it's very challenging, I think, because you'd love to say we use a ID theft service that has 99.5% of the credentials in the world that have been breached, but there's no way of knowing. It's just absolutely no way, because you're dealing with a essentially criminal enterprise. So it's hard to say that one is better than another, because you never know which ones have got what, and they don't know either. It's not like, I can't think of an analogy, but it's a tricky one. But yeah, I can't see any problem with using the ClearScore one to go back onto a topic. And yeah, the Have I Been Pwned database is a good one to check as well. Go and pop your email address in there, see what is there. Most people are there, by the way. Don't be surprised when you find yourself, because LinkedIn got breached years ago, and there was like 5 billion or something ridiculous that came out of the LinkedIn breach, sets of credentials and things like that. So it makes EasyJet look like a drop in the pond at 9 million, I think it was. So most people are there from LinkedIn. There are a few other big ones that have hit over the years as well. But it's good to know. It's good to understand. But it's a bit like waiting until you appear in a dark web search and then going off and changing some passwords is probably a little bit like coming back to find out you've been burgled and then putting an alarm on your house. It's you're reacting after the event. My advice would always be act proactively. You're responsible for your cybersecurity, nobody else. Don't wait on manufacturers to patch bugs. Don't wait on hackers to receive bug bounties for finding problems. Go out there, change your passwords, enable two-factor authentication. Don't use the same password across multiple services, and you've just lifted yourself out of 95%. Patch your computers. You can stay up to date. You've just removed 95% probably of everything that's going on around there by doing really easy, basic, free things. So I wouldn't rely on something like a dark web monitoring service to say, oh, I've appeared in a search, now I should go and start changing things, because it's too late.
Great, thank you, Dan. That was absolutely brilliant. I will be sending out the recording following this webinar, so this afternoon, so please feel free to share it with your teams. And also, if you are interested in anything like the Complete Training Academy or anything like that, feel free to email me, or any other questions, and I can forward them on to Dan or anyone else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the weekend.